History books are full of epic tales, right? We read about brave kings, decisive battles, and the glittering weight of crowns. We learn about powerful men who forged empires and charted the course of nations. But what about the stories that slip through the cracks of these grand narratives? The quiet, almost forgotten whispers from behind the throne. This is one of those stories. It's a story that's both fascinating and deeply unsettling. It's about a little girl, just 6 years old, who found herself at the very center of royal power. Imagine being 6. Your world is probably filled with games, stories, and learning your letters. Now, imagine being told you're going to marry a king, not just any king, but a powerful, 29-year-old man you've never met. This wasn't a fairy tale. It was the stark reality for Isabella of Valois. In the year 1396, a political alliance was being forged between two great rivals, England and France. The 100 Years' War had raged 4 decades, and both sides were exhausted. They needed peace, and in the world of medieval royalty, peace was often sealed with a wedding ring. The groom was King Richard II of England. He was a complex and often controversial ruler, still grieving the recent loss of his first wife, Anne of Bohemia, whom he had deeply loved. The proposed bride, Isabella, the daughter of King Charles VI of France. There was just one, rather significant, problem. Isabella was only 6 years old. When the English envoys first saw her, they reported back that she was a pretty little creature. But the age gap was shocking, even by medieval standards. Many in the English court were outraged. They argued the king needed an heir, something a child bride couldn't provide for many years. They felt it was an insult to the memory of his beloved Queen Anne. But Richard was determined. He saw this marriage not as a romance, but as a promise of peace. He traveled to France to meet his future queen. The first meeting must have been a strange and intimidating scene for faced with this powerful foreign king Lita. Isabella reportedly declared, "Sire, if it pleases God and my lord and father that I shall be Queen of England, I shall be well pleased, for I am told I shall then be a great lady." She played her part perfectly. Richard, for his part, was apparently charmed by her precocious dignity. He treated her with gentleness and respect, promising her father he would be a kind guardian until she was old enough to be his wife in truth. And so, the wedding went ahead. Isabella, adorned in jewels and fine silks, was married to Richard in a lavish ceremony. She was now the Queen of England. She wore a heavy crown long before she could possibly understand the meaning of marriage, let alone the complex politics of her new kingdom. She was a queen before she truly knew who she was. She arrived in England to a life of unimaginable luxury, but also profound loneliness. She had her own royal household, Lady Zine waiting, and every comfort imaginable. But she was a child in an adult world, separated from her family and her home. Richard visited her often, treating her like a cherished daughter rather than a wife. He would sit with her, talk to her, and bring her gifts. Contemporary accounts suggest a genuine, albeit paternal affection grew between them. He was her king, her husband, and her only protector in this strange new land. But the peace this marriage was supposed to guarantee was fragile. Back in England, Richard's reign was becoming increasingly unstable. His nobles were growing restless, angered by his autocratic style and his perceived favoritism. A storm was gathering, and at its center was Richard's own cousin, Henry Bolingbroke, a man Richard had exiled. In 1399, while Richard was on a campaign in Ireland, Henry returned to England, not just to reclaim his lands, but to claim the throne itself. By the time Richard returned, it was too late. His support had crumbled. He was captured and forced to abdicate. Henry Bolingbroke was crowned King Henry IV. Suddenly, the world of the 10-year-old Queen Isabella was turned upside down. Her protector, her husband, King Richard, was a prisoner. She was placed under house arrest, her future completely uncertain. King Henry now had a difficult problem. What to do with a child queen of the deposed king? She was a valuable political pawn, a daughter of the King of France. Henry initially proposed that Isabella marry his own son, the future King Henry V. But Isabella, with a loyalty and spirit that defied her age, flatly refused. She remained devoted to Richard, refusing to believe he was truly gone. Even after he died in captivity, under mysterious circumstances in 1400. For over a year, she mourned, dressing in black and refusing to accept any other marriage proposal. Her stubborn loyalty made her a diplomatic headache for the new English king. Eventually, after prolonged negotiations, Henry IV agreed to let her return to France, though he kept her dowry. In 1401, Isabella, now 12 years old, finally went home. But her story wasn't over. Her life had already been shaped by the crown she wore so briefly. At the age of 15, she was married again, this time to her cousin, Charles, Duke of Orleans. This match seems to have been a genuinely happy one. For a few short years, she might have found a semblance of the life that was stolen from her. But tragedy seemed to follow her. In 1409, at the age of just 19, Isabella died shortly after giving birth to her first child, a daughter. Her life was a fleeting, poignant chapter in the grand sweep of history. A pawn in a Game of Thrones, a child bride, a loyal wife, and a forgotten queen. Her story is a powerful reminder that, behind the dates and the battles, there are real human lives, often lived in the shadow of great power, and their stories deserve to be remembered. Forget everything you think you know about fairy tale weddings and royal romance. In medieval England, saying I do had nothing to do with love. It was a cold hard transaction, a business deal. For the nobility and royalty, marriage was the ultimate political tool, a Game of Thrones played with wedding rings instead of swords. Imagine being a young noblewoman, maybe just a girl. Your future isn't yours to decide. It's a chess piece on your father's board. Who you marry could mean the difference between war and peace, poverty and prosperity. These marriages were about consolidating power, merging vast estates, and forging unbreakable alliances. A daughter's hand in marriage could secure a restless border and a generations-long feud, or win the loyalty of a powerful baron. Love, that was a luxury few could afford, and most didn't even consider. Let's look at some real-life examples. Think of Eleanor of Aquitaine, one of the most powerful women of the Middle Ages. Her first marriage was to King Louis VII of France. Why? Because her lands, the vast and wealthy Duchy of Aquitaine, were a prize beyond measure. When that married was Arnold, she didn't stay single for long. She quickly married Henry II of England, making him one of the most powerful monarchs in Europe. Their marriage was a whirlwind of political ambition and conflict, producing sons like Richard the Lionheart and King John. But love? It was a battlefield of wills, not a romance. For the women at the center of these deals, life was incredibly precarious. They were often betrothed as infants, their fates sealed before they could even walk. Sent to live in the households of their future in-laws, they were raised to be docile, obedient, and most importantly, fertile. Their primary duty was to produce a male heir, to continue the family line and secure the inheritance. If a wife failed to produce a son, she could be cast aside, her marriage annulled on flimsy grounds, and her entire life's purpose declared a failure. The pressure was immense and relentless. It wasn't just the royals. This transactional view of marriage trickled down through society. For merchants, it was about merging businesses. For peasants, it might be about combining two small strips of land to make a more viable farm. Everywhere you looked, marriage was a practical arrangement designed for survival and advancement. Personal feelings were a secondary concern, if they were a concern at all. So, when we watch movies or read books about knights and ladies falling in love, it's important to remember the harsh reality. Medieval marriage was a strategic alliance where women were the currency. Their lives were dictated by the needs of their families and the political landscape of the time. It was a world where a wedding vow was less a promise of love and more the signing of a contract. The personal happiness of the bride and groom was simply not part of the negotiation. What do you think of when you hear the word childhood? Maybe it's playgrounds, school, cartoons, or family vacations. For most of us, it's a protected time for learning and playing. But if you were born 1,000 years ago, your experience would have been completely different. Welcome to childhood in the Middle Ages, a world where the concept of child as we know it simply didn't exist. Back then, children were often seen as miniature adults. As soon as they could walk and talk, they were expected to start contributing. Life was hard, and every pair of hands counted. There wasn't much time for playing games when there were fields to plow, animals to tend, or crafts to learn. The line between being a child and being an adult was incredibly blurry. This miniature adult idea comes from the work of a historian named Felipe Arraiz. He argued that in medieval art, children are often depicted with adult proportions and serious expressions, just scaled down in size. They're dressed in smaller versions of adult clothing, not the colorful, comfortable kids' clothes we see today. This art, he suggested, reflected a social reality. Childhood wasn't a distinct, special phase of life. It was just a waiting period, and a very short one at that, before he took on adult responsibilities. So, what did a typical day look like for a medieval child if you were born into a peasant family, which most people were? Your education wasn't in a classroom. It was in the fields and in the home. From as young as 5 or 6, you'd be helping out. Little boys would learn to scare birds away from crops, gather firewood, or look after the pigs. As they got older, they'd graduate to plowing with oxen and learning their father's trade. Girls would learn from their mothers how to spin wool, cook, bake bread, brew ale, and manage the household. Formal schooling was a luxury reserved for the very rich, or those destined for the church. For noble children, life was different, but not necessarily easier. Their childhood was a rigorous training program for their future roles. Boys were sent away as young as 7 to serve as pages in another noble's household. There, they learned etiquette, horse riding, and how to use weapons. By their teens, they'd become squires, assisting a knight in battle, hoping to one day become knights themselves. Noble girls were also educated, but their curriculum focused on managing a large estate, needlework, and sometimes music and reading. Their primary purpose, to secure a powerful alliance through marriage. And this brings us to one of the most shocking aspects of medieval childhood: marriage. While today we think of marriage as a choice made by 2 consenting adults, in the Middle Ages, it was often a strategic contract between families, especially for the nobility. And these contracts could be made when the bride and groom were still in diapers. Betrothals could happen at birth, and marriages could be legally binding for girls as young as 12 and boys at 14. However, even by medieval standards, some cases were extreme. Take the story of Isabella of Valois. In 1396, she was married to King Richard II of England. He was almost 30. She was just 6 years old. Now, this was purely a political alliance to secure peace between England and France. The marriage was never consummated, and Isabella was treated with respect at the English court. But can you imagine, at an age when modern children are just starting school, she was a queen in a foreign land, a pawn in a massive political game. It's easy to look back and judge, to think of medieval parents as cold or unloving. But that's not the full picture. The world was a much more dangerous place. High infant mortality meant parents faced the constant threat of losing a child. Perhaps this harsh reality led to a more practical, less sentimental approach to parenting. They loved their children, but they also knew that survival depended on teaching them the skills they needed to become functioning adults as quickly as possible. There were still toys, like wooden horses and dolls. There were still games. There was still love. It was just framed by a much harsher reality. So, the next time you see kids running around a playground, take a moment to appreciate it. The idea that childhood should be a time of innocence, play, and protected learning is a relatively new invention in the grand sweep of human history. For the children of the Middle Ages, growing up was a job, and they had to start work early. Thanks for watching. If you found this glimpse into the past interesting, be sure. Have you ever wondered why child marriage was so common throughout history? It's a tough topic, but the reasons are often far more political and strategic than they are romantic. Let's peel back the layers and look at the cold, hard logic that drove these arrangements for centuries. Forget everything you think you know about marriage being about love or partnership. For the powerful elites of the past, kings, emperors, and lords, marriage was a currency. It was a tool, a weapon, and a contract. And when the bride was a child, that tool became even more effective. So, why a child? The primary reason was long-term control. Imagine you're a king trying to secure a fragile alliance with a rival kingdom. A treaty can be broken. A promise can be forgotten. But a marriage, that was a bond of blood, a physical link between 2 dynasties. By By arranging a marriage between your son and the rival king's young daughter, you weren't just making a deal for today. You were making a deal for the next 50 years. This young bride would be sent to your court, often as young as 5 or 6 years old. She would grow up surrounded by your culture, your language, and your political advisors. She would be separated from her family and her homeland, leaving her completely dependent on you and your court. Over the years, she would be molded, educated, and indoctrinated to be loyal to her new family, not her old one. By the time she was old enough to have any real influence, her allegiance would, in theory, already be secured. Her own family's interests would be a distant memory. Think of it as a long-term investment. The younger the bride, the more time you had to shape her into the perfect queen for your kingdom and the perfect pawn for your political games. It was a way to neutralize a potential future threat before it could even form. The girl wasn't seen as a partner. She was seen as property, an asset to be acquired and cultivated. Her value was in her lineage and her malleability. This strategy also prevented other suitors from getting in the way. By betrothing a princess in infancy, a king could lock in an alliance early, warding off competitors who might offer a better deal later on. It was like calling dibs on a whole kingdom. The future was secured, the succession was clear, and the political landscape was stabilized, at least for a while. Furthermore, this practice gave the groom's family immense leverage. If the bride's home country ever thought about breaking the alliance, they would be threatening the life and status of their own daughter. She was, in essence, a Havelia hostage, guaranteeing the good behavior of her relatives. It was a brutal but effective way to maintain power and peace through coercion. So, when we look back at these historical child marriages, it's crucial to see them for what they were. Calculated political maneuvers. They weren't about love or companionship. They were about power, control, and securing the future of a dynasty. It was a system that allowed kings to own the future, not just negotiate for it, all built on the lives of young girls who had no say in the matter. It's a dark part of our history, but understanding it helps us see how political structures have used marriage as a tool for control for centuries. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today we diving deep into a topic that is on everyone's mind. How to unlock the full potential of your brain. And who better to guide us than the incredible Dr. Tara Swart? If you've ever felt stuck, unmotivated, or just wondered if you could be getting more out of your mind, you're in the right place. We're going to explore some of Dr. Swart's groundbreaking insights into neuroscience and how you can apply them to your daily life. First up, let's talk about neuroplasticity. This sounds like a complicated scientific term, but it's actually a super empowering concept. It means your brain isn't fixed. It can change, adapt, and grow throughout your entire life. Dr. Swart explains that every thought you have, every action you take, actually forges new neural pathways. Think of it like creating a new trail in a forest. The more you walk it, the clearer and easier it becomes to follow. This means you have the power to literally rewire your brain for success, happiness, and resilience. So, how do we actually do this? A key pillar of Dr. Swart's work is the power of manifestation, but grounded in solid science. It's not just wishful thinking. It's about a process she calls validation. This is where you consciously decide what's important to you. When you focus your attention on your goals, your brain's reticular activating system, or RAS, starts to filter the world differently. It's like when you decide you want a certain type of car, and suddenly you start seeing it everywhere. Your brain is actively searching for opportunities and information related to what you've tagged as valuable. But it's not just about thinking. It's about doing. Dr. Swart emphasizes the importance of taking small, actionable steps. This creates a powerful feedback loop. You take a small action, your brain registers a small win, and it releases a little bit of dopamine. That feel-good chemical motivates you to take the next step and the next. This is how you build momentum and turn big, scary goals into achievable realities. It's about creating an upward spiral of positive action and reinforcement. Of course, none of this can happen if your brain isn't healthy. Dr. Swart is a huge advocate for the basics: sleep, nutrition, and hydration. Think of them as the foundation upon which everything else is built. When you're sleep deprived, your brain's ability to learn and form new memories plummets. When you're not eating brain-boosting foods like healthy fats and antioxidants, You're starving your command center of the fuel it needs to perform. Simply things like drinking enough water can have a massive impact on your cognitive function and emotional regulation. Another crucial aspect is managing stress. Chronic stress floods your system with cortisol, which is toxic to brain cells and actively hinders neuroplasticity. Dr. Swart teaches practical techniques like mindfulness and meditation to calm your nervous system. Even just a few minutes of deep, intentional breathing can switch your brain from fight or flight mode to rest digest mode, creating the optimal state for growth, creativity, and clear thinking. It's about creating a safe, internal environment for your brain to thrive. So, what's the takeaway here? You are the architect of your own brain. By consciously directing your focus, taking small but consistent actions, and taking care of your physical and mental well-being, you can harness the power of It's about moving from being a passive passenger in your life to an active driver, using the science of the brain to create the reality you truly want. The work of Dr. Tara Swart shows us it's not magic, it's science, and it's accessible to every single one of us. Thanks so much for watching. I hope this gave you some powerful ideas to think about. Have you ever wondered what it's really like to marry a king? Forget the fairy tales you grew up with, the stories of charming princes and happily ever afters. Let's talk about the harsh reality, the cold hard truth behind the crown and the castle walls. We're going to peel back the gilded layers of a royal marriage and look at what it truly represents when an all-powerful, seasoned monarch takes a young bride. Picture this: a king. Not just a man with a title, but a figure sculpted by decades of rule. He's a grand master of the political chessboard, a seasoned general who has tasted both victory and defeat on the battlefield. His mind is a fortress filled with state secrets, military strategies, and the intricate art of governance. He has seen empires rise and fall, allies turn into enemies, and has signed decrees that have shaped the lives of millions. His hands are stained with the ink of treaties and, perhaps, the blood of his adversaries. He's not just experienced, he is the embodiment of power. This king understands that everything, and I mean everything, is a transaction. Every alliance, every law, every public appearance is a calculated move to consolidate his power and secure his legacy. He's been educated by the finest tutors, mentored by the sharpest political minds, and hardened by the relentless pressures of the throne. Love, affection, companionship, these are luxuries he might indulge in, but they are never the foundation of his decisions. For him, marriage is not a romantic union. It's a political tool, a strategic merger, the most critical acquisition he can make. Now, let's bring in his bride. She's likely young, perhaps barely a woman, chosen for her beauty, her fertility, or the strategic value of her family's name. She might be educated in the gentle arts, music, poetry, etiquette, but she is a novice in the brutal game of power politics. Her world has been one of sheltered gardens and courtly whispers, not war councils and clandestine meetings. She walks into the marriage with dreams, or at the very least, with the hopes of a life of comfort and respect. But what does this marriage actually look like from day one? The chasm between them is not just about the years that separate them. It's a canyon of power. He sees a future heir, a political alliance solidified, a beautiful asset to display at court. He sees a piece of property, a valuable addition to his collection of territories and titles. She is a queen in name, but a pawn in reality. This is not a partnership. A partnership implies equality, a shared journey, mutual respect and influence. How can there be a partnership when one person holds all the cards? He makes the decisions. He dictates her life, her friends, her schedule, even the clothes she wears. Her role is to be dutiful, to produce an heir, and to be an ornamental reflection of his status. Her opinions, if she dares to have any, are irrelevant. Her desires are secondary to the needs of the state, which are, of course, synonymous with his own needs. It's a transaction of ownership. She is owned by the crown, and by extension, by him. Her body is not her own. It belongs to the dynasty. Her future is not her own. It is tethered to his ambitions. He didn't marry a woman. He acquired a womb, a title, and a political chess piece. Every smile she gives in public is a performance. Every curtsy a reminder of her subservience. While the world sees a queen, she is, In essence, a prisoner in a golden cage. The tragedy is that she is celebrated for her sacrifice, praised for her duty, while the true nature of her existence remains hidden behind the castle's imposing walls. So the next time you hear a story about a powerful old king and his young bride, look past the splendor and ceremony. See it for what it often was. Not a love story, but a story of possession. A stark reminder that in the world of absolute power, even the most intimate of relationships can become the coldest of transactions. Thanks for watching. If you found this perspective interesting, hit that. Have you ever wondered what it's like to be born into royalty? It's not old fairy tales and happily ever afters. For some, it's a gilded cage, a life planned out before they can even speak their own name. This is the story of a marriage that was never about love. It was a cold, calculated move for political stability. A transaction that benefited a crown but sacrificed a child. Imagine this: a grand, echoing hall, filled with towering adults, dressed in silks and velvets, their faces serious, their voices a low murmur of words too complex for a young mind to grasp. In the center of it all stands a little girl, just 6 years old. She's swallowed by heavy royal garments, the fabric stiff and unfamiliar. She feels the weight of 100 pairs of eyes on her, but she doesn't understand why. She doesn't know this is the moment her childhood ends, traded away for a treaty she can't read and a peace she can't comprehend. All she knows is the silent, unyielding expectation to obey. This wasn't a choice she made. Love was never part of the equation. Her future was a chess piece on a political board, moved by hands that were supposed to protect her. While other children were learning to play, she was learning protocol. While they were making friends, she was being groomed to be a queen in a foreign land, a wife to a man she had never met. Her days were no longer filled with laughter and games, but with lessons on etiquette, history, and the duties of a royal consort. Her world shrank from a playground to a series of rooms where she was constantly observed, corrected, and molded. The loneliness must have been immense. A child surrounded by adults, yet utterly alone. There was no one to confide in, no one to cry to who wasn't also a part of the grand political machine. Her feelings were irrelevant. Her duty was everything. She was taught to suppress her own desires, to smile when she was sad, and to be a perfect, silent symbol of an alliance. The person she might have become was buried under layers of responsibility and expectation. She was a princess, yes, but she was also a prisoner of her own birthright. Think about the psychological impact. Growing up, she would have seen marriage not as a partnership built on affection and respect, but as a duty, a strategic maneuver. Her own identity was secondary to her title. She was the Duchess, the Queen, the symbol of unity. But who was the girl underneath it all? Did anyone ever ask what she wanted? Did she even dare to dream of a different life? A life where she could choose her own path, make her own mistakes, and fall in love on her own terms. This story isn't just a piece of history. It's a powerful reminder of the human cost behind the grand tapestries of power. It shows us that even in the most opulent settings, the most fundamental human needs for love, freedom, and self-determination can be denied. The crown was secured, the kingdom was stable, but a little girl's spirit was crushed in the process. It makes you look at those historical portraits and wonder what unspoken stories are hidden behind their stoic, painted eyes. Thank you so much for watching. If you found this story compelling, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more hidden histories. Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We'll see you in the next one.